So we're going to take two different worlds and we're going to put them together because they exist in you. And that would be your faith and the legal system. And we could just start, you could probably tell more attorney jokes or lawyer jokes than anybody.
I don't know any.
Oh, okay, good. How did those two worlds go together for you?
I had started praying in January of 2015, I think, for God to give me some direction. What had happened was, you know all the things we were talking about, climbing the mountains, walking through the desert, and doing all those things. Amazingly enough, in January of 2015, I reached a point where I was done. Not in a bad way. I simply was grateful for the life I had led. And I had reached a point where I asked God to, let's do what you want me to do now. I've done what I wanted to do, and you blessed me, and you've allowed me to do it. You've allowed me to come from a wheelchair to second highest mountain in the world. You've given me everything that I could ever ask for. And I'm 55 years old. I reached a point where I realized that either it's time to live this commitment or you accept the fact that it might become too late. And so I started praying. And like everybody else, there's, at least in me, there's a great tendency to try to direct the answer. In other words, you pray for something, but you're also pretty much like, this is what I'd like to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I started praying about this, and I'm getting nothing. I mean, nothing. And I didn't, and I was fully committed to it. I literally had come to the point where if it meant give up all my possessions and go do missionary work somewhere or something like that, if that's where I thought God was sending me,
wow,
I
so
would do it.
You're approaching God with a totally open hand.
Because he had given me everything for 55 years.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for this huge life change that's going to make things totally different. And I know that Margaret's going to support this. She's a good woman, and you know we could figure a way to make everything work. And I'm not getting anything. And I was talking to somebody over at the circuit court one day after I'd come out of a hearing in the prosecutor's office. And they said something about Kirk Carpenter is going to retire. And the person said to me, I'm going to be the next judge. And right out of my mouth came the words, no, I think I will be.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, it scared me too. I had never mentioned it to anybody. I had never talked to my wife about it. I hadn't talked to my Uncle John about it. It hadn't been discussed with anybody at the office. I hadn't talked to any other lawyers about it. And I said this. And I walked back across the street and I'm like, what in the world did you just do? And within about 15 or 20 minutes, I realized what had just happened. It was call it a God moment if you want.
Yeah.
It wasn't where I thought I was going to go. I was going to be in an exotic location, being a missionary, and it's right here in DeKalb County.
One of the programs that you see is a faith intervention program. I'd like you to talk about why we need it and how would it work.
One of the number one things that a judge can do is to get a hold of first-time juvenile offenders, people who have just started to roll off the tracks.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you can correct that situation, then you can remove them from the problem, and they will become good, productive people, and you won't see them back. If you don't do that effectively, then they become what I call clients. They become adult offenders. They become recidivists. Most of them operate at a level where you're looking at something like a short term of incarceration and probation, where you meet with the probation officer once a month. They're right back here in our community, and they are role models to some young people, and they influence people that they come in contact with. And so their bad behavior and their incorrect behavior starts to spread in our community, and it creates a bigger impact. But I also don't like government fixes for people problems. And so I wanted to look initially at the most productive ground for solving problems, which is addressing that juvenile problem. That first chance with
Yes.
them is where you can be so effective. DeKalb County is a tremendously well-churched county.
Yes.
We have a tremendous number of people of faith. We have truly fantastic pastors, ministers, preachers, elders. I mean, fascinating even on a countrywide scale how
Yeah.
skilled and talented some of the people here are. And I realized that this resource was just sitting there, and we had people that, if given any kind of an opportunity at all, would love to help address these problems. And I thought, certainly there is a way that we can use people of faith and churches to provide the necessary direction for these youth that come into contact with the criminal justice system in a juvenile sense. And I started going around and talking to local pastors and preachers. And I started to develop in my mind a thought that we could have a program that ran independent of the courts. But it would be an optional participation program. And the goal would be to take these young people, and if they would elect to participate in the program and the prosecutor would sign off on it, then we would start immediately with personal responsibility. They would have an obligation to find a religious leader in our community of their choice, make an appointment with that person, go in and tell them what they did, talk about the problems they have, and sit down and work out a program of rehabilitation and restoration and put it in written form. That would be presented to the prosecutor, and if she felt that that was sufficient and worthy and of enough duration, that if this person successfully did all these things, it may be regular church attendance, it could be community service in the church, it could be outreach work, it could be helping shut-ins, mow their lawns, do things like that. It could be a multitude of things. It could be independent Bible study with checking in with the person that's mentoring them on that. All of those things could be components. It'd be open, pretty much, with some guidelines, some things you might consider. Put that together. Prosecutor would sign off on it. And the understanding would be that if the youth did actually complete this program, that juvenile case is now resolved and it's over. But that wasn't what was so neat about it. Look what would happen. We would place in that young person's life a good person, a person they could look up to, a person that they had interacted with on a regular basis, at least for a period of time. Probably a person that even in later years they could call and talk to if they needed to. We put them in a church home, and they've met other people in the church.
Yeah.
There's a decent chance they'll continue to attend. They got to get to the church. Mom or dad's got to take them there. Maybe mom and dad will go to church too, and maybe brothers and sisters will go too. And so it has a potential to go far beyond what's written on this piece of paper and to impact a lot of lives. It doesn't cost anything. And it allows the people in this community who have an actual thirst to fulfill the commission, not preaching to the choir, but to actually fulfill the commission, to fulfill themselves. And when I talk to people, it was very, very interesting. They want to do this. They don't know how to do this.
Right.
They need the structure.
Yes.
And nobody ever gave them the opportunity. And really, all I want to do is simply put that opportunity there to bring these two things together.
A naysayer might say, hey, what about the separation of church and state? How would you answer that?
It's time for people of faith to simply put on their armor of God and to pick their faith back up proudly and march back into that fray. There is nothing wrong with being a Christian. There is nothing wrong with publicly expressing Christian values. There is nothing wrong with participating in the governing of our local community from a position of faith. There is nothing wrong with those things. The words separation of church and state don't even appear in the Constitution. It's not even there. The Constitution prohibits the national government from establishing a national religion. It made sense at the time. The people that came here to establish this country had had Anglicanism forced on them. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to be in that kind of a situation. And that's what they were gunning for there with that.
That's the intent.
Now, the thing that makes this program viable and makes it something that doesn't violate in any way any constitutional provisions, and the Constitution now been interpreted differently than I just talked about, don't get me wrong, but because it's a voluntary program, and because the program would be administered off-site, if you will, in terms of the government, it wouldn't be a court program. Mm-hmm. It would be a program set up by people that I love and trust, who aren't affiliated with the court system, and it would become a tool for the prosecutor to feed people in. It would have nothing to do with government. If they don't want to do it, they don't have to do it.
How would you address the drug issues as a judge in DeKalb County?
Well, bear in mind that being a judge has very little to do with law enforcement. You bring a person with a possession case in front of a judge, realistically, you don't have a violent criminal, you don't have a situation that's going to call for long-term incarceration, at least not in the beginning. So they get a short-term commitment probably to jail, maybe a short-term commitment in prison, depending on the level of the offense. And then they're going to be placed on probation, and they're going to meet with the probation officer about once a month. And almost without question, because meth is one of the most highly addictive substances in the world, that person is going to reoffend. I would guess, it's just a guess, no statistics at all, I would guess 90% chance of that. Very few people successfully, given that kind of a set of tools, a jail sentence of some short duration and probation where they check in once a month, those people aren't going to successfully get off meth. What is going on right now in some places, and has been for quite some time, is the establishment of what are called problem-solving courts. And problem-solving courts are courts that are just components of the court that exists. It's just a program, really, but they call it that. It's overseen by the judge. But basically what you do is you take these individuals, and rather than spending a judge's investment in the average person probably with a drug case would be about 20 minutes. Take you 20 minutes maybe to sentence them and send them over to probation and never see them again. You can go back and drink coffee then. You know, it's a very little impact as far as the judge is. Problem-solving courts, on the other hand, involve a great deal of judicial work. If a judge wants to engage in a problem-solving court for addiction problems, he's looking at seeing these people once a week for 18 months.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's a very intense program. These people come in and they plead guilty to every single thing they're charged with. And generally it is pleading guilty to everything they're charged with consecutive sentences. Huge hammer hanging over their head. And then you try to get them into places. One of my favorite places is Serenity House. Boy, those are marvelous people. Both here and in Warsaw, marvelous people, very successful. You get them into, though, something where they can begin to start their rehabilitation, and understanding that it's going to be a bit of a rocky road. But these problem-solving courts are unique in a way that you wouldn't imagine. These people have to convince a panel of people that they are truly committed to rehabilitation, or they don't get to go there. They'll get sentenced just like always, and away you go. But if you can convince a panel of people made up with people in the community, usually someone from law enforcement, definitely someone from probation, the judge sits on it almost always. In Kosciuszko County, which has the program that I admire the most, and the program that I consider to be the most effective, Haas from the Serenity House sits on that. There's a variety of people. They usually have somebody like a nurse or something, some person with some medical training. And these people screen and determine whether or not this person would be right for the program. They don't always get it right. Sometimes they think somebody would be successful and they're not successful at all. If you're not successful, you get that sentence. Yeah. You've already pled guilty.
Yeah.
You're out of here. And so it's a great
Incentive.
it's a great stimulus to get
Yeah.
this right, if you can, but some people just don't get it. The people participating with the problems start interacting with each other in the courtroom with the judge. And they start sharing each other's successes, and they start supporting each other and encouraging each other. And it creates a dynamic that simply can't be reproduced any other way. And that's what causes the great success of these programs.
You have an idea for Veterans Court.
I do. We have 3,000 veterans in DeKalb County. This is an amazingly patriotic county. That's 10%. Mm-hmm. One of every 10 people you pass, statistically, in Auburn is a veteran. Mm-hmm. And what's going on now is that we are constantly engaging in conflicts around the world, and it's going to continue. Things aren't going to get better, they're going to get worse, and we're going to have more veterans. But we have these young people who volunteer to serve their country. And when they come back with issues and problems that they didn't leave with. A lot of those bases are remote, and the only pastime is to sit around and drink. That happens. Some of these places, the access to things like hashish and marijuana is very, very easy, and drug problems develop. Some people just simply can come back with post-traumatic stress issues, which causes strife in the home, results in domestic issues, has people run afoul of the law. But these are basically good people who were in a structured environment, and they honorably served our country.
Yes.
And it is unpalatable to me that when we have a person who has returned from service, has come afoul, at least not in a huge way, obviously that's a different situation, but in a smaller way. And it's an issue that arose during their service. They come back, and a lot of these people have been in charge of millions of dollars worth of equipment, have very responsible jobs, and they find themselves not even able to find menial employment. And so it creates a negative environment, and they get in trouble. And it's unpalatable to me to reward their service with a criminal conviction. That shouldn't be the goal of any person in this county. That's not what good people do. It should be our goal to get in there and solve the problem so that it doesn't happen again and not have a criminal record. And Veterans Court is a problem-solving court once again. But the idea is that you get the veterans in there, and it's run very similar, but each person gets a mentor from our veteran community. Combat veteran needs to be with a combat veteran. Those things have to happen. And the other thing that you do with veterans is, because a lot of them really aren't in the greatest of economic situation right now, is that you run it through a different system. We have DeKalb County Court Services where people get drug and alcohol treatment through a county program and you pay for it. Mm-hmm. Veterans are entitled to all of those services of high caliber through the VA in Fort Wayne. So you utilize those services for free for these people. They served, and they're entitled to it, and there's no reason why that we shouldn't let them use those services. So you use VA services to help these people. You get them a mentor. You have the weekly meetings, just like I was talking about. You have a different dynamic. I've been to veterans courts. You have a different dynamic with these people. They tend to be more disciplined, more structured. They do seem to have, even very early on, a much greater sense of kinship, and their mutual support for each other develops quicker. Mm-hmm. And veterans courts work really well, because you don't have bad people basically there. Now, there's a person every now and then that goes serve in the military. They were bad when they went in, they're bad when they get out. They're not going to get past the screening committee. But for a lot of these people who developed a problem during their service, like I said, the reward isn't a criminal conviction. The reward for a veteran that honorably served is that the people of this community say, you know what, we're going to step in and help you fix this problem.
I love how you want a problem-solving court and how you want conflict to be resolved and you want restoration and you use the community as a whole to accomplish that. I got to ask you, if we haven't covered it already, what makes a good judge?
One of the most important things and one of the most appealing things in a really good judge is humility. A judge that can talk frankly and openly and down to earth with someone is far more effective than someone who is standoffish and pompous. You are trying to, even if you're sending the person away, you're trying to make the person understand that this is a consequence of their actions. And Indiana is a very, very unique state. Our Constitution says that our whole system of criminal justice isn't based on retribution. And I don't remember the word the Constitution uses, but it's basically restoration. The goal of our criminal justice system is to problem solve. It's in the Constitution. The goal is not punishment. The goal is to fix. And really good judges get that. So humility and an understanding of the principle that our state is founded on, our state constitution, which is to restore people, not to punish them. Those would be critical. Wisdom, you have to have wisdom. And wisdom has to flow from a couple directions. Wisdom has to flow from life experience and being a regular person and being involved in a regular kind of life. I'm not talking a country club, golf course life. I'm talking about, I think it's important actually, and it fits kind of well for me, so maybe I'm saying it because it describes me. A person who's worked in a factory, worked on a farm, worked on construction crews, interacted with people all their life of different and varying social stratas.
Yeah.
Because it gives you an appreciation for what these people's lives are like.
Yes.
And helps you understand what the impact will be on their life when you do certain things. If you look at something from on high, you might not realize that what you're doing here will have an impact that's vastly disparate from what it would be to you. So you have to have some understanding of where these people are at, and so you have to have that kind of life experience wisdom, but you have to have God-given wisdom. I think that anybody who aspires to be a good judge better aspire to spend some time in prayer, probably on a regular basis. You're gonna need something beyond yourself, and I'm not talking about forcing the Bible into a courtroom. I am talking something individual. I am talking about the man asking his God to help him.
Humility, wisdom, a desire to restore. I gather that you want to serve as judge because you feel called to actually serve others in that manner with humility, wisdom, and restoration. Is there any other catalyst on why you want to serve as judge?
I do feel called and directed, and because it is a direction I did not see myself going. I think that really increases my sense of why I know this is right. There are some other catalysts, but they are catalysts that arise from the community support and friend support. I see people expressing this faith in me, and I see people becoming very active and involved and interested, and it inspires me.
Kurt, you're an amazing story of restoration. You survived by God's hand a near-death experience when you were 12 years old with that boating accident, and you've pursued God for His purpose for your life, and it looks like He's directing your steps. Faith is really a step at a time, and you're a person of faith, and it's a step at a time that you've climbed the mountains and walked through the deserts, literally, and it's just been a blessing to have you share with us today.
I thank you so much for talking to me. You're a friend, and you're good to talk to.
Thank you, Kurt. You know, when you think of law and justice, you think of courtrooms. But the Bible is actually our foundation for law in the United States of America. The Bible speaks repeatedly about justice. And God actually wants justice in our relationships. Here's usually what happens. We have a tendency to talk more than we listen when conflict arises. We have a tendency to only hear one side of the story, and then we become partial to it, and we never resolve conflict. But justice that God has designed is just the opposite, and He wants it to take place in our relationships. God wants us to listen more than we talk. Proverbs 18:13 says, "He who speaks before listening is to his folly and shame." God wants us to have equal opportunity. He wants us to get both sides of the story. Proverbs 18:17 says you'll hear one side of the story and you'll just think it's all right. I'm paraphrasing, but we need to hear both sides of the story. It's amazing how there's a difference if you just listen to one side of the story. Third, God wants us to be impartial because He is impartial. We don't get caught up on advancing one side of a conflict. We become impartial to the whole equation. Proverbs 18:5 calls us to be impartial when resolving conflict. And fourth, that's exactly what justice is for at the end of the day, is to resolve conflict. Proverbs 18:15 says that we should continue to pursue knowledge, which is intimacy with God, as we resolve our conflict. Romans 12:18 says, as far as it depends on us, if at all possible, live at peace with all men. God wants us to live reconciled relationships. Listen more than you talk. Get both sides of the story. Be impartial and resolve conflict. That's what God is looking for in you and in me, to bring resolution to our lives when two objects attempt to occupy the same space at the same time. To take a step toward achieving conflict resolution in your life, would you consider memorizing Proverbs 18:13? He who answers before listening, it is to his folly and shame. And pray to God, God, help me listen more than I speak. And you will watch as you take the first step toward bringing justice to your relationships, as God will allow you to be more objective, to get both sides of every story, to be impartial, and to resolve conflict.